Charlie Munger, the man who spent 60 years sitting next to Warren Buffett, making them both obscenely rich, once said something that nobody in finance ever puts on a motivational poster. He said, "The first $100,000 is a bitch." That's the quote, verbatim, from one of the greatest investors who ever lived. Not inspiring, not "you can do it," not "believe in yourself." Just, "this specific number is going to hurt." And then, and this is the part everyone forgets, he said, "But you have to do it." Because after that first $100,000, he said, something changes that you genuinely cannot understand until it happens to you. Most people hear that quote and focus on the first part, the difficulty, the grind, the years of discipline that feel like they're going nowhere. But the people who actually build wealth, real, lasting, generational wealth, they obsess over the second part, what changes after. Because the honest truth is that $100,000 isn't just more money than $10,000. It's a completely different game. And once you understand why, you'll never think about money the same way again. My name is Nova. I spend a probably unhealthy amount of time thinking about financial psychology and why most people who want to build wealth never actually do. If that's a question you've been sitting with, hit subscribe and stay with me on this one, because we're going somewhere most finance videos never go. Now, before we talk about what $100,000 does to your life, let's be honest about what life looks like without it. And I mean really honest. Not the sanitized stock photo version of living paycheck to paycheck, the actual texture of it. You know that Sunday afternoon feeling when the weekend is winding down and instead of being present, instead of actually relaxing, some part of your brain is already running the numbers for the week ahead. Rent is due on the 15th. You've got a dentist appointment you've been putting off for 8 months because you're not sure what it's going to cost. Your friend just texted about a trip they're planning in March, and you immediately start doing the mental gymnastics about whether you can fake a conflict in your schedule, rather than admit the real reason you can't go. That low-grade financial anxiety that never fully turns off, that's not a personality quirk. That's not you being bad with money. That is what it actually feels like to operate below the threshold. And it is absolutely exhausting in a way that's almost impossible to explain to someone who's never felt it. Here's what's fascinating, and this is where neuroscience starts to get genuinely uncomfortable. Studies from Princeton researchers found that financial scarcity doesn't just create stress, it consumes cognitive bandwidth in measurable, testable ways. The mental load of managing not enough money reduces your effective IQ by the equivalent of going through an entire day without sleep. Think about that. You're not just poor, you're cognitively handicapped by being poor. Every calculation, every trade-off, every mental juggle about whether this expense is safe or whether that purchase is worth it, each one costs processing power that should be going toward your career, your relationships, your health, your future. You're running a high-performance computer with 60% of its RAM permanently occupied by a spreadsheet that never balances. And here's where $100,000 enters the conversation in a way nobody talks about. Because the psychological shift doesn't just start at $100,000, it completes there. You get a version of it at $10,000, you get a bigger version at $20,000, but at $100,000, something structurally different happens in how your brain categorizes your place in the world. And Munger, who grew up during the Depression, who understood scarcity in a visceral, lived way, he understood this. The first $100,000 is the proof of concept. It's the moment your brain finally, truly accepts that you are someone who builds wealth, not someone who just survives financially. And that identity shift changes every single decision you make for the rest of your life. But let me show you the math first, because the math itself is almost philosophical. Let's say you start with nothing and you're saving $1,000 a month, earning 8% annually. To get to your first $100,000, it takes you roughly 7 years. 7 years of discipline, of saying no, of watching other people spend freely while you're playing the long game. 7 years is a long time. That's 2 presidential elections. That's your nephew going from a toddler who barely speaks in complete sentences to a 9-year-old who has opinions about video games. But here's where it gets strange. Your second $100,000 doesn't take another 7 years.
It takes about 4.5. Same $1,000 a month, same 8% return, same you, same effort, same habits. But now your existing money is pulling weight alongside you. By the time you're going for your third $100,000, the timeline drops to 3 years. Your fourth comes in under 2. And at some point, somewhere around $400,000 to $500,000, your portfolio is generating more than $1,000 a month in growth on its own. Your money has now exceeded your contribution. You are no longer the primary engine of your own wealth building. You have become a passenger on a train you built with your bare hands, and now it runs without you. This is what Munger was pointing at. Not that $100,000 makes you rich, it doesn't. It's that $100,000 is the threshold with a mathematics of compounding visibly, tangibly, undeniably starts working harder than you are. Before that point, it can feel like a theory. After that point, you watch it happen in real time, every single month, and it rewires something deep in how you understand money. I want to tell you about a guy named Marcus. He's 31, lives in a mid-sized city in Ohio, works as a project manager at a logistics company making $68,000 a year. He drives a 2016 Subaru Impreza with a small dent in the rear bumper that he keeps meaning to get fixed. He has one streaming subscription, brown bag lunches 4 days a week, and a studio apartment he split from a 2-bedroom 3 years ago when his roommate got married, and he decided the extra cost of living alone was worth it for his mental health. That was a real trade-off. He didn't pretend otherwise. Marcus started this process at 25, with $3,000 in savings and a goal he was slightly embarrassed to say out loud because it felt both too big and too small at the same time. Year 1, Marcus has $16,000. His coworker just bought a house. His college friend posted photos of a European vacation. Marcus went to his cousin's wedding in Cleveland and drove home with his hand-me-down suit wrinkled in the back seat. He told himself it was fine. Most of him believed it. Year 3, Marcus has $51,000. He starts checking his brokerage account less often, not because he's checked out, because he's figured out that checking it daily is a form of self-sabotage. He's learned to be bored by his own discipline, which is harder than it sounds. Year 5, Marcus is at $84,000. He's close enough to the threshold that he can feel it, which is the worst possible time psychologically, because suddenly the waiting feels unbearable. He has 3 conversations with himself that year about whether to cash out and use it as a down payment on a condo. He doesn't. This is the hardest year. 6.5 years, Marcus's account crosses $100,000 on a Tuesday in November. He's sitting in his car in a parking garage after a work meeting, and he refreshes the app one more time, and there it is, $101,847. He sits there for a few minutes, not really doing anything. Then he drives to a restaurant he likes and orders the $24 pasta he's always ordered the $16 version of. Nobody knows what happened. There's no celebration. There's just him and a plate of pasta and a quiet understanding that something has permanently shifted. 3 months later, Marcus negotiates a raise. He'd been underpaid relative to his role for 2 years and had been too nervous to push back because some part of him felt like he couldn't afford the risk of making them uncomfortable. With 6 figures in his account, the conversation feels different. He walks in knowing, not hoping, knowing that he can survive saying the wrong thing. He asks for $12,000. They offer $8,000. He accepts. It's the first time he's ever negotiated a salary in his life. This is what I mean when I say $100,000 changes the game. Not because Marcus is suddenly rich, he isn't. He still has the dent in his bumper and the brown bag lunches in the studio apartment. But he negotiated from strength instead of fear, and that $8,000 raise compounds forward over his entire career in a way that no single investment decision could match. Now, here's the part that will probably sting a little, because this is where most people derail themselves, and they do it right at the worst possible moment.
There's a window, typically somewhere between $60,000 and $90,000 saved, where the proximity to the milestone becomes a psychological liability. You're close enough to see it, far enough away that it still requires sacrifice. And that combination produces a specific kind of dangerous thinking. The thinking sounds like, I've already done the hard work, I deserve something. I've been so disciplined, I should enjoy some of this. Maybe it's a new car, maybe it's an expensive vacation, maybe it's the bigger apartment that would only cost $400 more per month, which doesn't feel like a lot until you realize $400 more per month for 5 years is $24,000 in lost savings, plus the compounding on that $24,000, which makes it closer to $40,000 in real future wealth you just traded for more square footage. The people who build wealth don't feel rewarded at $80,000 and treat themselves to an experience that sends them back to $60,000. They feel motivated at $80,000 because they can see the threshold and they know what's on the other side of it. The reward isn't the spending. The reward is watching the math change. And if you've never experienced that, if you've never watched your portfolio generate more in a month than you manually contributed, you genuinely cannot understand how good that feels. The spending will always feel hollow by comparison once you've tasted actual compound momentum. And here's the thing nobody does the real math on. When you spend $20,000 at $80,000 saved and drop back to $60,000, you haven't just lost $20,000, you've lost the compounding that $20,000 would have done over the next 20 to 30 years. At 8%, that $20,000 would have been $93,000 in 20 years. So that vacation, that car, that apartment upgrade didn't cost $20,000. It cost you nearly $100,000 in future net worth. Once you start thinking in those terms, luxury feels like a surprisingly bad deal. Let me tell you about the other thing that shifts at this threshold, and this one surprised me when I first started noticing it in my own thinking. When you're below $100,000 saved, money still feels like a thing you accumulate. You're counting it, tracking it, celebrating every milestone because each one still feels fragile, like it could reverse. You're in a hoarding posture mentally, protecting what you have rather than deploying it strategically. But somewhere around $100,000, money starts to feel like a tool you operate. You stop celebrating the balance and start thinking about the rate. You stop asking, how much do I have, and start asking, what is this doing? The mental shift from accumulation to velocity is subtle but profound because it changes what decisions you pay attention to. You start noticing that your housing costs are the biggest lever, not your coffee habits. You stop mentally tracking every $15 purchase and start aggressively optimizing the 2 or 3 decisions that actually move the number. You become strategic in a way that's only possible when you've graduated from survival math. This is why wealthy people often seem weirdly relaxed about small expenses. It's not that they're reckless, it's that they've already solved for the big variables, and they understand that $4 coffee doesn't move the needle in either direction. The obsession with small spending is a psychological artifact of scarcity. Once you're past it, it falls away on its own. Here's what I want you to sit with before we finish. The $100,000 milestone takes longer than it should. It will feel, at some point, genuinely impossible. There will be months and maybe years where the number barely moves, where the market drops, and you watch something you worked years to build give back 6 months of progress in a week. There will be moments where a friend buys a house, or starts a business, or takes a trip, and you will feel the specific loneliness of playing a long game in a world that rewards short ones. And in those moments, I want you to remember Munger's actual quote, not just the first part, the whole thing. The first $100,000 is a bitch, but you have to do it. He didn't say it would be easy. He didn't say it would feel fair or fast or visible from the outside. He said you have to do it because it's the doorway, the singular, necessary, irreplaceable threshold that leads to everything that actually works in your favor.
The math doesn't start working differently at $50,000. It doesn't start working differently at $75,000. There's something specific about crossing six figures that reconfigures both the numbers and the person doing the counting. Marcus figured this out in a parking garage on a Tuesday in November. Ronald Reed figured it out in a flannel coat held together with safety pins. The question isn't whether the math works. It does. It always has. The question is whether you're willing to be boring enough and patient enough and quietly disciplined enough to let it work for you. Your future self already knows the answer. They're just waiting for you to catch up.